Life happened, growth happened, healing happened, and somewhere along the way, so did purpose. This isn't just a comeback, this is evolution. My name is Ani Long, and welcome back to Hey Girl, I See You, Season 2. We're talking faith, growth, leadership, healing, boundaries, purpose, and the real life lessons that shape who we become. No filters, no pretending, just real conversations, real growth, and real impact. So grab your coffee, your journal, or just a quiet moment for yourself. Because trust me, sis, I see you. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Hey Girl, I See You podcast. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Coach Ani, and this is the space where we grow together, heal together, and remind one another that purpose is still possible, even after life has tried to convince us otherwise. Today's episode, as always, I have another one for you today. This one has been sitting on my heart for quite some time because I think there are so many of us walking around carrying guilt for the version of ourselves that was simply trying to survive. Maybe you weren't as patient as you wanted to be. Maybe you built walls instead of boundaries. Maybe you stopped trusting people. Maybe you became quieter. Maybe you became harder, or maybe you just became tired. And now that you're healing, you look back at the version of yourself with disappointment instead of compassion. Can I tell you something on today? The version that you survived deserves grace too. Not because everything you did was perfect, not because every decision was right, but because that version of you was doing the very best they could with the strength, wisdom, and understanding they had at that time. I think sometimes we forget we judge yesterday's version of ourselves using today's healing. We criticize the person who was fighting battles that the current version of us no longer has to fight. That's not fair. And today, I want us to change the way we look at the person we used to be. You see, survival mode changes people. Life in general has a way of changing people. Pain changes people, disappointment changes people, burnout changes people, grief changes people, betrayal changes people, rejection changes people. Life has a way of introducing you to a version of yourself you never thought you'd meet. Sometimes we become more guarded. Sometimes we stop answering the phone as much. Sometimes we don't laugh as freely. Sometimes we question people who genuinely love us because we've been hurt by people who said they love us. Sometimes we become so focused on surviving that we forget what it feels like to simply live. Survivor mode is an interesting place, you see, because when you're in it, you don't have the luxury of thinking about thriving. You're just trying to make it through the day. You're trying to make it through that one doctor's appointment. You're trying to make it through that funeral. Whew. You're trying to make it through that divorce, trying to make it through that betrayal, another sleepless night, another bill. You're trying to make it through another difficult conversation. Sometimes survival doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes survival looks like getting out of the bed when you didn't feel like it. Sis, going to work with tears in your eyes. That's what survival looks like. Smiling so your children don't know how heavy your heart really is. That's what survival looks like. Showing up because people are counting on you, even when you're wondering who's going to show up for you. That's what survival looks like. And here's what I want you to understand: survival will teach you habits that healing will later ask you to unlearn. Think about that. Survival will teach you habits that healing would later ask you to unlearn. When you've been hurt enough, you learn to keep your distance. When you've been disappointed enough, you stop expecting so much from people. When life has blindsided you enough, you stop preparing the worst. You start preparing for the worst instead of believing for the best. Those habits didn't develop because you were weak. They developed because your heart was trying to protect itself. Can I say something that may help somebody today? You are not a bad person because survival changed you. You are a human being who is trying to stay afloat. There's a big difference. And maybe, just maybe, God never expected you to stay in survival mode forever. Have you ever thought about that? Maybe that season wasn't meant to define you. Maybe it was meant to develop you. Because survival may have introduced you to a version of yourself, a different version of yourself. But healing is introducing you to the version God always intended. Stop hating your old self. Stop beating up your old self. One thing that I am still learning: you can honor your growth without hating who you used to be. Whew, now I know that struck somebody's nerve. You can honor your growth without hating who you used to be. I promise you that took me a while to understand, because when we start healing, we sometimes become embarrassed by the person we used to be. When talking with friends, catching up, and they always bring up the old version of you. But some of them, sad to say, never take the time to get to know the new version of you, or don't want to know the new version of you. They want to be stuck on that old person, on that old version of you. We replay conversations, we replay decisions, we replay reactions. And instead of celebrating how far we come, we spend our energy criticizing a person who didn't know what we know now. Let me ask y'all something. How fair is it to expect yesterday's version of you to respond to with today's wisdom? How fair is it to expect yesterday's version of you to respond with today's wisdom? How fair is it to expect the version of you that was grieving to think like the version of you that's healing? How fair is it to expect the version of you that was exhausted to make decisions with the clarity you have today? It's not. And yet, that's exactly what we do. We become our own harshest critic. I should have known better. I should have left sooner. I should have spoken up. I should have trusted God more. I should have seen the signs. I should have, maybe not. But here's what I do know. You made the best decision you could with the information, the strength, the support, or lack of, and the emotional capacity you had in that moment. And that's worth remembering. Growth doesn't require you to hate your past. Growth asks you to learn from it. There's a difference. Because when you hate who you used to be, you start believing that the version of you has nothing valuable to offer. When you hate who you used to be, you start believing that version of you has nothing valuable to offer. But the truth is, sis, that version of you survived. That version of you kept praying when you wanted to quit. That version of you kept showing up when life felt heavy. That version of you kept loving people while carrying wounds no one else could see. That version of you fought battles that this current version of you no longer has to fight. Sis, can I tell you something? You don't owe your old self an apology. You owe your old self a thank you. Thank you for refusing to quit. Thank you for getting back up. Thank you for holding on until healing can find you. Because if that version had given up, sis, this version wouldn't exist. You know what grace does? Grace allows you to look back at your journey without being imprisoned by it. Grace says, I acknowledge that I wasn't perfect, but I acknowledge that I was trying. Grace doesn't erase responsibility. Grace simply refuses to erase your humanity. And maybe today, instead of saying, I can't believe I used to be like that, try saying, I'm grateful God didn't leave me there. There's a difference. One statement keeps you trapped in shame, the other celebrates transformation. You did what you could, sis. One thing I've noticed, we oftentimes judge our old version from perspectives of who we are now. Think about that for a second. We look back at decisions we made 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 6 months ago, and we say, what was I thinking? Why did I stay so long? Why did I keep giving chances? Why didn't I speak up? Why didn't I walk away? But here's the question we don't ask. Who was I then? Because the truth is, you weren't the person you are today. You didn't have today's wisdom. You didn't have today's peace. You didn't have today's confidence. You didn't have today's healing. Sis, you didn't have today's relationship with God. You were making decisions from a place you were in, not the place you've grown into. Sometimes we expect our younger selves, our hurting selves, our grieving selves, our overwhelmed selves to make decisions like someone who had already healed. That's an impossible expectation. It's like asking someone who's still learning to walk why they aren't running. Let me help somebody today. You cannot judge survival decisions through healed eyes. I'm going to say that again for the person in the back. You cannot judge survival decisions through healed eyes, because healed eyes see what wounded eyes couldn't see. Healed hearts recognize red flags that broken hearts overlooked. Healed minds understand boundaries that exhausted minds couldn't even imagine. That's not because you're smarter now. It's because you've grown. Growth changes your perspective. That's one of God's gifts. He allows us to look back and see things differently, not so we can shame ourselves, but so we can appreciate how far He brought us. And yes, there are probably things you would do differently today. I know there are things I would, but that doesn't mean the old version of me was foolish. It means God has been faithful enough to teach me, to teach you, to mature you, to heal you, to strengthen you, to develop you. And that's something to thank Him for, sis, not beat yourself up over. Imagine if God judged you the way you judge yourself. Imagine if every mistake was all He ever saw. Imagine if every bad decision erased every good one. But that's not how God loves us. He corrects us, He grows us, He forgives us, and then He keeps walking with us. So maybe it's time for us to extend ourselves that same grace that God has been extending to us for a long time. Because if God can see your potential while knowing your past, sis, surely you can stop condemning yourselves for a version of you that He never stopped loving. Your healing requires compassion. Healing is not just accountability. Healing also requires compassion. Now, don't get me wrong. Accountability matters. It does. Taking responsibility matters. It does. Learning from our mistakes matter. It does. Growth requires honesty. But healing cannot survive in a moment, in an environment, in society where shame is constantly speaking louder than grace. Some of us have become experts at holding ourselves accountable, right? But we've never learned how to be compassionate towards ourselves. We forgive everybody else. We encourage everybody else. We remind everybody else that they're human. But when it comes to us, child, we become our own toughest critic. We replay every mistake. We magnify every failure. We rehearse every regret. And then we wonder why healing feels so far away for us. Let me tell you something. You cannot heal while constantly punishing yourself. At some point, you have to stop holding yourself hostage for a season that God has already begun redeeming. Compassion doesn't say, what happened didn't matter. Compassion says, what happened mattered. And so did what it did to me. There's a difference. Because sometimes we're so busy judging our reactions that we never stop to acknowledge the pain that caused them. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you spoke to yourself? Honestly, the way you speak to someone you love. When was the last time you spoke to yourself the way you speak to someone you love? Be honest with yourselves. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to simply be human? Not perfect, not strong every minute, not having all the answers, just human. I think sometimes we believe being hard on ourselves is what produces growth. But in my experience, growth comes from truth, and healing grows in the presence of grace. God has a way of correcting us without condemning us. He convicts, but he also comforts. He challenges, but he also restores. And if that's how our Heavenly Father deals with us, why do we insist on treating ourselves with less compassion than He does? Maybe healing isn't asking you to become someone completely different. Maybe healing is asking you to become kinder to the person you're becoming, to stop speaking to yourself through the voice of shame and start speaking through yourself or to yourself through the voice of grace. Because here's what I've learned: compassion doesn't slow down healing, it doesn't. Compassion creates the environment where healing can finally take root. You can water a flower with encouragement. You'll never grow one with condemnation. So if you're listening today, give yourself permission to breathe. Give yourself permission to grow. Give yourself permission to not have it all figured out. Isn't a race, it's a relationship with God and with yourself. And both require patience. And this is where grace comes in. Give yourself grace. Maybe you spent years extending grace to everybody else, but you just never learn how to extend it to yourself. Maybe you've forgiven the people who hurt you, right? But you still haven't forgiven yourself. Maybe you've accepted that God has forgiven you, but you still wake up every day replaying old mistakes. Can I lovingly tell you something? That's a heavy way to live, sis. Grace says, I acknowledge what happened, but I refuse to let it become the only thing that defines me. Grace doesn't erase your story, sis. Grace reminds you that your story didn't end there. So today, I want to extend some grace to yourself. I want you to extend some grace to yourself for everything you walked through, for everything you've carried, for every disappointment, every tear, every betrayal, for every setback, for every season that was meant to break you but didn't. Because here's the truth, sis. If you're listening to my voice today, you survived. You may have scars. You've survived. You may still be healing, but you survived. You may still have questions, and many of us do. I know I still do. You survived. And that's all that matters. You're still here, sis. Sometimes we think grace is pretending it didn't hurt. No, that's not what grace looked like at all. Grace looks the pain in the face, acknowledges it, learns from it, and then refuses to live in prison by it. I don't believe God carried you through all of those seasons just so you could spend the rest of your life condemning yourself for how you survived them. I believe he carried you so one day you could look back and realize I made it. Not because I was strong every day, but because God was faithful every day. So today, stop apologizing for surviving. Stop criticizing the person who was doing the best they could. Stop measuring yesterday's version of yourself by today's healing. Instead, thank God for bringing you through what was designed to take you out, sis. And then give yourself the same grace that He's been giving you all along. I want to thank y'all again so much for taking time to hang out with me today. If this episode encouraged you, make sure you like, subscribe, follow on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you enjoy your podcast. And please share it with someone who may need this reminder. New episodes premiere every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Thank you for everyone that listened, every share, every comment, and every prayer. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. As always, hey girl, I see you. Before I let you go, I do want to leave you with a final thought. I want you to think about the version of you that almost didn't make it. The version that cried in private, the version that questioned everything, the version that felt disappointed, the version that felt alone, that didn't always get it right, that was simply trying to survive. The version, the old version, the one you spent so much time criticizing, the one you called weak, called foolish, the one you wish could erase, that version survived. Not because she got everything right, not because she never made mistakes, not because she always chose the right words or made the right decisions, but because she refused to quit. That version cried tears nobody saw. That version fought battles nobody knew about. That version sis kept getting back up even when she wanted to stay down. That version sis trusted God even when she didn't understand what she was doing. And because that version survived, sis, you're here. You're wiser. You're stronger. You're healing. You're growing. You're becoming. Not because life didn't hurt you, but because God never stopped carrying you through it. Sis, so today, stop looking back at her with shame. Stop criticizing her. Stop wishing she never existed. Honor her. Pray for her. Thank God for her. Because without her, sis, you wouldn't be the person you are today. That version deserves compassion. That version deserves grace. That version deserves understanding because she was doing the very best she could with what she knew and with what she had and with the strength she could find. But somehow, through the grace of God, sis, you made it. So the next time you tempted to look back with shame, remember this. Don't measure your survival by your scars. Measure it by God's faithfulness because every scar has a story and every story is evident that God kept you. The version of you that survived deserves compassion, not constant criticism. Give yourself some grace. You made